Welcome to Gold Shields. Join NYPD veterans Tom Smith and Dan Murphy. With over 50 years of combined experience chasing drug lords, dismantling cartels, and hunting terrorists. Now they pull back the curtain, sharing raw, unfiltered stories from the front lines and the heroes who stood beside them. No topics off limits. This is real. This is true crime. This is Gold Shields.
Welcome back to Gold Shields. Dan Murphy with Tom Smith. How you doing, bud?
I'm awesome, man. Season 3. Here we go.
I can't believe it's 2025 and we're in season 3 already of this little project that we started a couple of years ago and we never thought would go anywhere. And here we are. We have listeners in about 60-something countries. We've had the most amazing, incredible guests on. And today, we're blown away by who we have and we're honored for her time.
Oh, it's, you know what? You go through lists of who, when, where, what stories, all this. And now I think is the perfect time for this story. Not only that our guest is incredible, but the story everyone knows, but no one knows. That's the best part of our show. We do this all the time. Everyone knows the story, but not really. And we're going to get you want to talk about behind the scenes show of this story that was going on is incredible. Again, everyone, welcome to season 3 of Gold Shields. Hit youtube.com/@goldshields. Hit subscribe, follow us the rest of the year, and so on. And one quick shout out to our close friends at copline.org. Make sure you check them out. 1-800-COPLINE, 1-800-COPLINE, 1-800-267-5463. Everyone who needs to speak to someone, hit them up, please. It is very, very important. Lisa Phillips has an amazing story of a story everyone knows about in Jeffrey Epstein. Lisa was involved with all that, with Epstein Island, with Jeffrey Epstein, with the manipulation that took place and the grooming and the abuse that took place. And no one is going to explain this with a better view than Lisa. And the host of the top killer podcast from now on, Lisa Phillips, thank you for joining us on Gold Shields to open up our year. Welcome.
Such an honor, Tom and Dan. I'm so excited to be here and share the story that actually nobody really knows. They just think they know.
That's right. That's right. Lisa, it's 2000. Let's take you back to 2000. You're 21 years old. You're young. You're beautiful. You're making your mark in the world of modeling. You're in the British Virgin Islands. How did you find yourself going to Epstein Island?
Well, as you said, I was like just building my career, living the life, loving my life at that time. And I went to the island. Well, I went to the British Virgin Islands for a modeling job. And I was there on a shoot with a Polish model, very beautiful, tall, gorgeous girl that I knew from my agency. And we had a day that was free. And she was like, I have a friend who owns an island close by. We should go and visit him. And I was just like, okay. I just didn't really think anything about it. And, the boat was sent for us and we went over to the island and everything was pretty normal. And we just, played in the pool. And there was like an older gentleman there with a younger girl. And I thought, this is not really out of the ordinary from what I'd seen in the modeling business. And so, everything just seemed totally fun. And we had a really good time for a couple hours just hanging out on the island. And then we went to our quarters and got ready for dinner. And then we got all dressed up in our little outfits of whatever. I mean, island outfits, nothing fancy. And then we went to a dinner and there was 2 other girls there and myself and the girl who brought me, the Polish model. And we just had a lovely dinner, lots of really good food. And then that's when I met Jeffrey Epstein, her friend, who she said was amazing. He's such a great guy. You'll love him. And she was pretty right. He was a really charming, really the type of person who was just so tapped into you, asking all the questions that nobody asks you and making you feel like really comfortable. And I was just enamored with him. I just had never been around a man that was that brilliant and smart and well-traveled and paid me a lot of attention, and I just thought it was really fun and interesting. So, he built up this kind of rapport with me, and I kind of liked him at that point, more like a mentor or a, kind of father figure. That's how he comes off. And so we had like a long dinner and hung out with him for a while. And during that evening, the man from the pool had walked up. And I had just been telling Jeffrey about how I grew up, my first few years in England. And he was like, "Oh, do you want to meet a prince?" And I looked up and I was like, "Hi." And I, shook hands with this man who he said was the prince. And so we just exchanged a few things right there, just like, about, living in England, and I lived in Oxford, and, they were kind of impressed by that. And then he just walked away. And so I didn't really think anything of that situation. I just thought, oh, wow, this is cool. Meeting an interesting man, these fun girls, and a prince. And so we had this great dinner. And so I went back to the quarters with the other model. We got ready for bed. And we were kind of like in our little 90s or whatever, getting ready to go to sleep. And there was a knock at the door. And one of the other young girls was like, "Jeffrey's ready for his massage." And I had looked at the other girl and was like, "Well, what's going on here? What do you mean massage?" I was like, "You go ahead." And she was like, "No, no, no, you have to come." And I was like, I don't know how to do a massage." And she was like, "Oh, well, you kind of have to. Just come with me, and just, you just have to." And so I was just like, well, he was a nice guy. I mean, can't really hurt giving an old man a massage. I don't know. I didn't really think anything about it. It just was like, oh, I'm on this island and she's telling me I need to do this. So I was just like, so I just went with her. And then we get to Jeffrey's bedroom. It was off on the other part of the island, kind of secluded, kind of by itself a little bit. I remember it was kind of a longer walk over there. And then we went in and he was naked on the massage table. And I was just like, you know, um, and at that point was when I was freaking out a little bit, because I was just like, what's going on here? And she seemed really kind of nonchalant and like, just like, we got to do this. It's okay. And so I just went along with her and went in, and it was a real massage. He actually does like real massages from young pretty girls. So, it was a massage. He actually talked about real massage techniques, and he taught me how to close my eyes and massage, because you could feel the muscles. I remember, things that he would say, and he was very playful and funny and asking questions, but these questions were a lot more personal. They were a lot more like, "Do you have a boyfriend?" and, and stuff like that. And then, he wanted us to remove our tops. And I was like clamming up and like looking for like an exit. Like, how do I get out of here? How do I get out of this situation? And I kept looking at her, and she was just like, you have to just like, go through with it. So we kind of just went through this massage, and this massage, it turned into a lot more of touching, and a lot of touching and like feeling in a way that was getting a little aggressive. And I don't know, it was getting really creepy. And it ended up being an abusive massage. And when we left that evening, when we left the room and went to our quarters, I just was like like shaking, and like, what just happened? Like, why did you put me in that situation? I just had all these questions for her, but she didn't really say anything, you know, and so it just was this really confusing situation that I didn't understand what was going on, and she didn't really say anything to me to explain it. And it was just weird. So I just, like, went to bed, and I remember just looking up at the ceiling all night long and, like, couldn't wait till we could just get out of there. And, like, in the morning, I was, like, waking her up as soon as I saw the sun come up, and just, like, was, like, went to go get a boat and get out of there, and went back to the islands to Tortola, where the clients were waiting for us. And I, like, wanted to say something like, "Well, you won't believe what just happened, like, I was on this island, and this guy, and, like, this creepy thing," and all this stuff, and but I just kept silent, and I just didn't really know what to say. So I kind of just kept that with me and went back to New York the next day.
Do you know why you kept silent? You know now?
Well, I was ashamed and embarrassed. I didn't speak up for myself. I didn't say, no, get away from me, stop. Like, I didn't say anything. I just like froze in the situation, and
I mean, you're 21 years old and you're somewhat trusting your friend.
friend,
You
yeah.
know, you're putting trust in someone. Now, my question, the first question that popped into my head was, this girl, did you ever work with her before
Yes, I knew
on
her.
other shoots?
Yeah, I had
Okay.
worked with her
And
before. I knew her.
she never mentioned Jeffrey Epstein before this one job.
Oh no, she never mentioned him. No, she never told me anything about him until the day we had a free day and she was going over there. And I don't know what was discussed between them, that there was another young girl there, bring her over. Like I don't really know to this day because this is a woman that I've reached out to many, many times to find out like what was going on? Like why did you do that? And still has never talked to me to this day.
Oh, wow. Okay, because that was gonna be my next question was it ever did any information about the case, what we're gonna get into later, that came out, was she ever mentioned about how long she was involved with him or where she was in that world? Did that ever come out? Or did
Well,
you
I
ever
mean, I
find that
knew
out?
I knew that she was very close to him, like one of the girls, because, you know, he had helped her get a visa to live in the US like he did for a lot of Eastern Europeans. So she was like indebted to him, right? She just said, indebted to him, right? She just kind of was under his spell, and obviously she was young too and probably had been groomed by him. And it wasn't to go back that evening, you're saying like I trusted her. Well, I actually trusted him too because he had, groomed me for a few hours of just really getting into my psyche and make me feel like heard, seen, finding out what my dreams and my ambitions were, talking to me in a way that no man has ever spoken to me. He just was a master manipulator. And a master groomer. So I was just under his spell a little bit too.
So
And so
when you first got to Epstein Island, when you first of all, he sends the boat, right? He sends the boat, you get there. Tell us what it's like there. How many other young girls did you see? How many other men did you see? And my last question as
well,
a part of this is gotta be the prince. Was he really a prince? Did you find out later on? Is he somebody whose name you just don't wanna say, or is it, he just threw that name up to you that he was a prince and he wasn't?
at the time, I just thought he was a prince. I'm not from the UK. I lived there for a few years growing up. The prince isn't as big of a deal to Americans as it is for the British. So it wasn't as big a deal. I didn't really think that much about it. But my story with Jeffrey Epstein comes very full circle and has a lot to do with the prince. So that day, there was a prince and a young blonde girl in the pool who, looking back at the records, and I've spoken to Virginia, you know, Gouffre, who was there. Um, I was also deposed for a case between her and another friend of mine that spoke a lot about that first day and seeing her on the island. Um, there was another blonde girl that was there too. And then Monica was blonde, and Jeffrey liked blondes. That's what he was into. So I was very much out of place being like this, multicultural, but multi-ethnic girl. But I had been raised very European. So um I didn't really not fit in a way. I was very much like those girls. And so um when I met the prince, it wasn't that big of a deal to me at that time. But my story of why I stopped talking to Jeffrey in the end had to do with the prince.
Right. So you get back to New York, and now everything that happened on that island somewhat kind of caves in on you. You're a lot of things change in your life once you get back to New York, and everything that happened kind of starts settling into your head. Uh, Take us through, your life change, what happened to you, once you got back to New York.
When it comes to the safety of law enforcement, first responders, and military personnel, every moment counts, especially in the dark. Streamlight provides the reliable, high-performance lighting solutions that these heroes trust in the most dangerous situations, whether it's a car stop, navigating dark alleyways, or exploring abandoned buildings. With Streamlight by their side, our heroes can tackle challenges with confidence, knowing they have the power of advanced lighting technology to guide them. From the first responders on the front lines to the law enforcement officers ensuring our safety, Streamlight is there to make every mission a little easier and much safer. Join us in supporting those who protect us. Visit streamlight.com to discover how you can be part of the team keeping our heroes safe. Because when they shine, we all shine.
Looking for powerful defense without the mess? Meet Impact, a revolutionary line of chemical irritants designed for law enforcement, military, and personal protection. With no blowback, no cross-contamination, and easy cleanup, Carry Impact delivers unmatched stopping power without the hassle. Whether you're in the field or on the street, safety should never be compromised. Protect yourself with the next generation of defense. Carry Impact, stopping power, redefined.
Well, I felt like I was always kind of a goody girl. Like I focused so much on my career and work. I mean, I still do that to this day. But I just felt like I had this worthlessness come over me. Like I was tainted in a way. Like who's gonna want me now? Like I've been abused, and I let it happen. And I had just had all this shame about it. And this like I get upset about it because I remember during that time not really having anyone to talk to about it. And Jeffrey, when and other young models and actresses spoke about him, he was always like, Jeffrey's amazing. Jeffrey's so great. He was spoken about in a wonderful light back then. So I would be like, oh, well, Jeffrey, maybe he's not so bad. It would kind of mess with me. And during that time, I just was like, wanted to forget about it. And so I would start partying. I would go out. I was like the light of the parties. I mean, I'm Capricorn. I'm very kind of an extrovert already. I'm not a shy person really in a lot of ways. So I just started going out and drinking and I would take drugs, and that was part of the scene back then. Your agents, your managers, photographers, people would give you drugs in the early 2000s. And before I met Jeffrey, I would say, no, that's disgusting. Leave me alone. And I was that type of girl. And after I was like, oh, give me that. Let me try that. Because anything just like suppress memories. And so for like 4 months, I was kind of just like hanging out on the scene pretty heavily and kind of enjoying it a little bit because it was a part of my personality I hadn't really explored. And I felt like kind of a different girl. And um and I would hear Jeffrey's names pop up here and there and always a positive light. And his secretaries, I mean, she would call me all the time, almost like 2 or 3 times a week. I feel like Jeffrey said, call this girl, call this girl. And in hindsight, I know why he wanted me back in his loop was because of what I saw on the island. I wasn't supposed to be there that day. I wasn't supposed to see a prince. That's a big deal. And so I know that they were trying really hard to get me back into the loop. And I kept saying, no, stop, leave me alone. Like, I don't want anything to do with this man. And then it was like 4 months later, Jeffrey called me. And I remember his voice, he speaks very quickly. And he was like, Lisa, it's Jeffrey, and I knew exactly who he was. And he was like, I remember on the island that you said your dream was to become a Ford model. He said, I was hanging out with Katie Ford the other day and I told her about you. And then I was like, what? All of a sudden, I was just like, wow, maybe he is a good guy. Like, he remembered exactly what my big dream was. And he was like, she wants to meet you. And I was like, oh, I can just go meet with her? And he was like, yeah. So I'm just thinking, oh, well, maybe feels bad for what he did on the island, and maybe he actually liked me and thought about me in a way. And I don't know. I was just like, all I cared about was like, oh my gosh, I want to go meet Katie Ford. This is a huge, big deal. Ford Models was the biggest agency in the early 2000s, right? And it was always my dream. I had tried at 16 years old. I had tried at 19 years old after coming back from South Africa to become a Ford model. And every time it was like, oh, you're not, it's not like now everyone can become a model. Back then it was very difficult. So when I heard that, I was just like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. Like, you're amazing. And so it started shifting in my mind. And of course, he's like reeling me back in. And he got me. So, you know, I got all dressed up and I went right over to the Ford modeling agency, and went to Green Street in the gorgeous, iconic office and went in there and I met Katie Ford. Had a great conversation with her and she says, "I love Jeffrey." I remember that. "I love Jeffrey," like everybody used to say. And I was like, "Yeah, me too," you know? And so that kind of shifted and changed in my mind, like, "Oh, he's a good man." And so I got signed to the Ford model agency. And, I was always super proud of that. And I was always very thankful for Jeffrey for that until many years later when I found out who he really was, and we'll get into that later. But that was very, very hard for me because Jeffrey was very good to me back then. After he did that for me, and I went back to go see him, he became like a mentor to me. And he taught me a lot about the world and how to navigate it and how to be an entrepreneur and how to be a businesswoman. And he did this for a lot of young women. I know many, many women who will never speak bad about him. Obviously, there was probably abuse, but they don't want to think that way, and I was like that. I was like that to 2019. I thought about Jeffrey in a positive way and always said good things about him, you know?
So
So that's how I got reeled back in.
so he makes the phone call to Katie Ford, and you might find yourself as a Ford model, which is top of the heap in your profession. You're elated, right? I mean, this is helping to squash any negative feelings you had about him or about that experience there. And I can tell you personally, during my years with the Ford modeling agency, I was very honored to be a Ford model. And it was, why? Was that funny? Tom, you're laughing. What?
No, I'm
I
like,
miss that part of your
I
life.
wasn't sure.
Yeah.
I'm like, "You're really handsome," maybe.
Yeah. I'm glad your eyesight's terrible. So you're thriving as a Ford model. You're having a great time. How does he get back in touch with you? Do you go back to Epstein Island, or do you visit him in New York? How many meetings and when was it that you got together with him after that?
No, I never went back to that island. But, I would go meet with him and have these wonderful conversations with him, like life-changing. He's a very brilliant, smart man, and he sees things completely different than the average person. And, I mean, anybody will tell you that about him. That's why he became who he was and helped, so many extremely rich, wealthy, powerful people. He just looked at things very, very differently. And so I would just listen to what he said and I would do the things he said, um, work wise and career wise. Um, and I know, well, I would see my friends around him. He put many of my friends through school, you know, paid for their visas, introduced them to their husbands, and got them dream jobs. He was very well connected. All he had to do was I mean, he didn't do it himself. He would just call people and, because he was a powerful man, he made things happen. And he did. He would introduce me to big directors and producers. I got movie roles from him, just, I mean, obviously I had to audition for things. Um, so he would actually do really good things for me. Um, I mean, I didn't even put together in my mind until years later, until he died, that some of the men he was sending me to, who I just thought, "Oh gosh, well, I'm a pretty girl, maybe that's what they do is to try to abuse you, try to have sex with you." I never even thought back then it was part of this whole pyramid of men, right? This deeper level of, "I'm sending you here for this reason, for his own good," and then having things on people, recording things or keeping track of what he was doing. I didn't find out till years later, the men that I had met were a lot of the same men hundreds of other girls had met. So, that really messes with you to realize, oh wow, when he was helping me back then, I thought he was helping me, but he really wasn't. He was sending, 10 or 20 girls at the same time to the same man.
You know, you had a description that I actually wrote down. I don't write a lot of notes, but this one I did, and I think it's so on point. You described his abuse as layered. It was just, like an onion. There was an outside horrible person, but able to get it was just piece by piece. And that is so in and of itself evil. And I say that because of the amount of time it takes to do that. You got to have a certain twist in your heart to go on so long with that kind of mind manipulation and abuse. That's like the scary part of hearing this story, that it wasn't, we hear all these stories, one bad thing happens in an office, one bad thing happens here, and so on and so forth. And then there's like an argument or whatever it was. Rarely do we hear something from someone like you that it's over so much time that this takes place. That blows my mind.
Well, it's a different type of person. It's a different type of predator. You know, it's there's not many of them. There's a lot of predators out there, but this type of master of manipulation and grooming, like you said, is a very intelligent person, um, who knows how to get into the psyche. And it's not just abusing young women. He's a very abusive to a lot of the wealthy men that he was working with. He was masterfully manipulating them as well. It wasn't just women. When predators like this manipulate, they manipulate everyone. It's the whole system. Like, he was recording everything, all the cameras everywhere, all the flight logs. He wanted to have things on many people, the men, to be able to get away with all of this. And you can compare him to like Larry Nassar, from the other Jewish man who was the gymnast, doctor. He also, was was manipulating for so many years, and everybody was at, oh, he was so amazing, he's so great. Bill Cosby was also a one, you know? And these types of men, they can get away with it for so long because they have the reputation of gold. Like, the way people speak about them, it's like they would never think, that he was. I mean, even for me, it took me, I've been in 9 months of EMDR therapy to actually get to the point to realize that I was abused by this man. I keep wanting to go back to, but no, he was good to me, you know? And it's like, that's how the grooming is so deep, because you want to believe that, no, that charming, nice side of him that was actually helpful was good, but that person never existed.
So sociopathic manipulators like him firmly understand the human psyche. They firmly understand the hierarchy of needs that exists within each person. He asked, right, he asked the deep questions he asked of you, so he would know exactly about Lisa Phillips. What buttons do I need to push? Where am I looking to go? He didn't ask you about his dreams because he wanted to wish you well. He asked you about your dreams so that at some point, when he felt he needed to, he could pull a rabbit out of a hat, make something happen for you, and you'd be okay again. And he wouldn't have to worry about you. Um, all the famous people that have come out, that have gone down there, I think the tip of the iceberg has only been shown already. And it's fascinating to see how many powerful men have fallen for that kind of stuff and gone there. And you mentioned cameras. I have no doubt that he has a camera everywhere, right?
Yeah, and not everyone who's powerful or famous knew what was going on. Everyone wants to be around, like Puff Daddy. Everybody wanted to go to his white parties. It's not everybody knew what was going on after hours. You know what I mean? So, Jeffrey also, just like with the girls, knew which ones he could manipulate, and also with the men, he knew which ones were like okay with doing things too. The majority of them probably weren't. They probably just wanted to be around him and, learn from him, or use him for whatever reasons. But um there were definitely a deeper layer of men that they have not let out the names yet, but that deeper layer of men that were up to no good, that were actually part of, like, this girl, and sending them. I mean, I remember he sent me to meet a huge director, a very big director, for a movie role that I auditioned for, and I got like a small part. Um, this was like the early 2000s. And I found out in 2020, years later, for that same role, I had met like 6 or 7 girls that also went. for that same audition through Jeffrey. So at the time I'm thinking, wow, he's like sending me. That's actually trafficking. He actually booked the flight and sent me to LA from New York. He's trafficking me. No?
And that was going to be
Mhm.
good. Go ahead, Lisa. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I found out that he was actually trafficking me because in that situation with the director closes the door to see what he could get from me, for the part. And he did that to all the other girls too. So Jeffrey sending these girls over there for a reason. Well, we're thinking, oh my gosh, we're getting a big opportunity for an audition, you know?
Yeah, you see, that was why, I have two questions for you. One is going to be how this all came to an end, and I'll get to that. But when did you realize in the midst of this how many girls were involved in this? Because I think you were kind of you'd mentioned one time to me you kind of did your thing. You weren't too much worried about somebody else and somebody else, which you can understand. You're worried about your career. You're taking care of yourself. When does when all this explode go, oh my God, how many girls were in the same situation as me? I mean, at that point, do you go, all right, bad, got it, but I wasn't the only one. Like, how does all that come out?
Ever wonder what stories your family history holds? Or want to relive the headlines that shaped our world? With newspapers.com, you can explore over 800 million pages of historical newspapers, from small town stories to global events that changed history. Uncover family milestones, dive into genealogy, or simply take a walk down memory lane. From the quirky to the profound, newspapers.com connects you to the past like never before. Start your journey today. Discover your story at newspapers.com, where history lives on.
Introducing Patriot Hard Seltzer, the bold, refreshing drink crafted by Navy SEAL Jason Redmond to fuel your inner warrior. Born from the heart of strength, resilience, and patriotism, Patriot Hard Seltzer combines clean, crisp flavor with a spirit of freedom. With just the right balance of refreshment and kick, it's the perfect choice for those who live free, fight hard, and drink Patriot. Whether you're tackling your day or unwinding with friends, every sip honors the courage and sacrifice of our nation's heroes. Go to patriotseltzer.com and put your order in today. That's patriotseltzer.com.
Well, when everything came out about Jeffrey, it was with his liaison, Ghislaine Maxwell, right? They were finding young girls that were poor or like in bad situations in West Palm Beach area. So there was a very much of a type of young girls. This is the 14 to under 18 in West Palm Beach. That's what came out about Jeffrey, you know? But that wasn't what was really happening in New York. In New York, it was over 18, and everybody knew it was over 18. We never ever heard of under 18. So everything came out about him, you know, in Florida. But what I'm talking about is the over 18, it's like 18 to 24, that were still young. Jeffrey used to say the mind doesn't develop to 25, 26. He kept the girls under 25 for a reason. 18 to 24 years old is all the girls that I knew. That was the age range. And back then, like, I knew friends who knew him. I still have very good friends that knew him that will never speak out about him, never say anything about him because he did good things for them. And they also probably don't want to admit the abuse. It's shameful. It's hard to go into the fact that he abused you. Sometimes I think, gosh, wish I'd never even like thought of coming out and speaking out and like thinking about what happened, because it hasn't been easy to deal with. Sometimes it might be easier to suppress it, right? And be like, oh, that never happened. And so I do know many girls, I'm talking about a lot, who were abused by Jeffrey Epstein and got many things out of it and have married and moved on and don't want to talk about it. That's fine. But for me in 2019, when he passed away, when I saw him on the TV and that he had died, I literally was like, it was almost like a dad or someone died. It was like I had this like, I was so broken. And I wanted to realize why. Why do I feel this way about this man who's obviously a bad man? Because we knew what was going on in Florida by 2019. And I just didn't want to think about it. But the more I started reaching out and talking to other survivors that were underage and over 18, it was the exact same story. He abused in the exact same way, except for with the models and actresses in New York, 18 to 24, you know, they were all kind of beautiful and like successful and ambitious. And he would help them with many things in their life. I don't think he was doing the same thing with the underage girls in Florida. He was just giving them money, you know, $200, whatever, here and there to do these massages. Um, so it was very different lives. He was living two double lives. It was totally different lives that he was leading in Florida and in New York. So yeah.
He had his approach, which varied based upon who his victim would be, right? He's looking at 18 to 24 young, beautiful, established models that have careers and stars in their eyes. He knows what he needs to do to manipulate them. Then he has the young people from the West Palm Beach area who don't have. He's a have and they're the have-nots. Two or $300 in a 15-year-old girl's pocket for doing something nobody's going to know about. There's an audience for that, and he tapped into that. And he knew he didn't have to follow up. He knew he didn't have to have personal contact with them afterwards and promise them things. He knew that couple of $100 would be enough. And he also knew very, very deeply in his soul that the average sexual abuse victim does not want to come forward for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is, I should have done A or B or C. And people will tell you that, right? Why didn't you just leave? Why didn't you just, they don't understand the nature of manipulation. They don't understand this whole game that he was an expert at. And so you have your own guilt and shame and weird feelings, and then he taps into that and he keeps trying to keep it okay. He keeps smoothing out the rough parts by getting you something or introducing you to somebody. And that's that layered approach that Tom talked about. It's all layered, and deep down beneath it is that feeling that you have that's still uneasy in you, right? You mentioned how you felt when you found out that Epstein had died. And then you were conflicted greatly, and certain things started changing, and now you're on the other side of that wall right now. How did that happen? And we'll talk about that if that's okay. All right, good. Okay. Anytime you're ready, I'll go. Okay. Lisa, all these girls involved with him and all these girls that have been to the island that he's helped out and stuff, why do you think so many of them went back to him? Why do you think so many of them stayed quiet about it and went back to him?
Well, actually, I believe that most of the girls, or if not all of them, actually saw something in Jeffrey that they liked. I feel like he made them feel good about themselves in some way. That was part of the good you always get with the bad they're doing. So I believe that they, in their minds, probably felt that he cared about them in some way. He was giving me money or he's doing this for me, you know? So I feel like it was a conflicting thing in their minds. And also probably the money they didn't have and they needed it. Which is different from the girls in New York and the ambition and being introduced to people. It's just part of the process that you think is normal. And then I feel like there's fear. I always felt like there was some underlying fear of what this man could do, take away what he's giving you, or um, do something to harm you. So I always felt like there was some type of fear of like I can't do anything, to upset this man.
Yeah,
So
and you know what, Lisa, take all the bad stuff out. The modeling world is so competitive as it is. So, however it happened, once you get ahead, you don't want to lose that. You don't want that because of it. It could be gone in a day, and you know better than anybody. And I think that's such a great point you brought out of the fear part of not of what was going on, but their career.
mhm, all over.
And you know what? He knew that. That's the horrible part of this. He knew how all of you were gonna feel, and that's why he did it.
Oh, for sure. I always felt like he would call Katie Ford at some point and be like, "Drop her." And I would be crushed.
Well, that's a
So
lot
I always
like
felt
Larry
like I was
Nasser.
like had to appease him in some way.
Yeah, you mentioned Larry Nasser before, right? The U.S. Olympic girls gymnastics trainer.
He was a
All he had to
doctor.
do, and a doc, that's right. All he had to do was walk over to the head coach and say, athlete number one over here is not ready for the Olympics. And that crushes an entire life spent training for that event. He had that power.
Oh, yeah, he had that power. She could not even have an injury, and he could say. Yeah, I interviewed, Jordan Weber, and she said the same thing. It was like a light bulb moment when she said, I would go to the other gymnasts and be like, "Is Larry doing this to you? Like this, is he touching you in this way?" And they would all say, "Yeah," but no one would ever identify it as abuse. And it was the same thing when I was younger with the girls. We'd be like, "Is Jeffrey giving you like creepy massages?" And sometimes be like, "Yeah, everyone just brought, oh yeah, creepy massage," but nobody wanted to talk about it. Nobody wanted to say how it was affecting them and how their life was spiraling out of control. They didn't understand because your body, it's abuse, it's not normal, but you don't know how to say it's abuse because it's not just sex. A lot of men think, oh, these guys just want to have sex with the girls. And most of them were not having sex. They were using their hands or vibrators or tools or things like that. It wasn't just sex. So that also makes you think like, oh, maybe he's not abusing me. It isn't until you meet, like, 100 other women who have gone through the same type of abuse.
Well, I think it's similar to so many other types of personal crimes against people. It's easy to look as an outsider and look at the facts and say, that's obviously that. But when you're there and you're in the middle of it, and he has done such a masterful job of making you feel so welcome, listening to your dreams, making you feel special. You're on this beautiful island. He's a powerful guy. You have stars in your eyes in certain ways. He knows when to strike.
Oh, yeah, I'm in his office. You go see him on the Upper East Side, and he has Bill Clinton in the office, all pictures with him everywhere and Hillary Clinton, and I don't know, you just see, I mean, when you walk into his house, he has Bill Clinton in a dress with, like, a blue dress, a red high. Like, you just think, like, he tries to and then he'd be on the phone. I remember many times he was on the phone with the wealthiest person in the world at that time. All the time, like, on the phone, I would hear his voice, and he would tell me little secrets about things and make you feel like, like you're special. But he also invited you to a lot of charity events, real good events, concerts, the Nutcracker, Broadway shows, things like that. And he wasn't a playboy. It's not like he sat around with all the girls around him. He invited you and you enjoyed the show, and he was, like, sitting over there. So he made you feel like, "Oh, I care about you. You're doing all these, really important things and events." So that was also part of it.
So now he gets locked up and dies, and he's done. He's out. Your reaction, you said before, you were sad, in a kind of what you described weird way, but you were. Then does that change to complete like anger? What? How does your emotions go from? I mean, that had to be a roller coaster. It had to be for
Oh,
you.
it was a roller coaster. It was 2019. I had just blended my family. I was, for the first time, like, madly in love, and I thought was a really good, healthy relationship. And he was sitting with me when I saw that he had died, and he saw my reaction to it, but he didn't really say anything too much. So I was thinking, oh, and I just had my moment, went back in the room. And then later on, I mean, he had bought a Tesla. I remember this because it was like a defining moment in my life. We were driving for him to get the Tesla for me to drop him off. And I remember turning to him and being like, I had that reaction to Jeffrey Epstein when he died. Like, I want to tell you what happened to me. Like, I want to tell you because I'm confused of what happened to me back then. I just want to talk about it. And he literally put his hand up in my face and was like, I don't want to hear about it. And I was like, what? Like, why? Like, it still was that moment of like the shame and worthlessness just came back into me. Like, oh, I'm not even good enough to discuss like something that happened to me back then, and it was terrible. I didn't trust that man ever after that. I was just like, and I also was like searching for someone I could talk to and figure out like what happened to me because it was 4 years I knew Jeffrey. It was a roller coaster, and it was other friends that were abused, you know, by the prince and by other people. So I knew what was going on when I fled New York in 2004 and moved to LA just to get away from him. And I hadn't thought about it for years. This is 15 years later, and I finally wanted to say, "Oh, I wanna talk about this. I wanna figure out what went on," and the person I loved and I was with never discussed it with me. I started doing documentaries. I started, speaking out a little bit, mostly about my friend's abuse, until I was really ready to start talking about what happened to me. Um, but even in that year, we broke up maybe a year and a half later, he never asked me, like, Are you okay? Like, what's going on? What happened?" I just felt like so alone. And that further made me feel ashamed and made me, you know, not even know how to process it. Like family and close friends and people were just wanted to push away from what I was coming out and talking about. But I stuck to it. And I was like, you know what? This is my truth. Whether it's good, bad, or ugly, it's something I went through and I'm gonna own it, you know? And I want answers. So I spoke to like probably, I don't know, 50, 60 younger girls under 18 and a lot of the older 18 to 24-year-olds. That were a lot of them were my friends, a lot of people I knew in passing, and a lot of people I didn't know. But a lot of the women that were speaking out in documentaries and stuff, and our stories are so similar. I mean, almost the same.
Well, he's not gonna change his method of operation, his MO. That's what he does. It
His
what works
MO
for
is
him.
locked in.
Yep. Yeah. So I'm very, very sorry to hear that, that he wouldn't listen to you. That's terrible. That's we all need to be understood and to be heard. I'm sorry that happened to you. So you talked about meeting and doing documentaries and stuff, and Tom asked a question about how this turned around, and you started going public. How did that all happen? How'd that come to be?
Well, my name was in the little black book with my parents' phone number. My parents lived within an hour of his ranch in New Mexico. Where I went and rode, like, went horseback riding on his ranch, and he wasn't there. But, just things like that. He would send gifts to my parents' house, and my parents knew, that I knew him. And, uh, I just had a hard time talking to them about it, and I don't know, I just felt something in me that I just felt like I wanted to understand myself. I wanted to understand what happened. I wanted to understand the manipulation and the grooming. I wanted to understand why did I have these feelings towards this guy, these mentor, father figure feelings when he was a bad guy. He did horrible things, but I had to figure out you know, my part in it all. And I wanted to, and I've always been that type of person. I do self-reflect and I do own up to things. And I have a victim mentality. I just wanted to know. And as I started speaking to these other women, they became powerful women. They were speaking out, and not the many friends that I know that were suppressing it and acting like nothing happened. But the women I felt, I admired the ones that were able to speak out and say, yeah, this happened to me. I'm not at fault. I was innocent, you know? But this is what happened, and talking about it, and doing the documentaries, and being interviewed, um, I felt like I was doing my part to bring awareness to also the broader picture of what Jeffrey Epstein was doing. It wasn't just him and Ghislaine, underage girls in Florida. There was a way bigger, hundreds of girls that were 18 and 24 in New York City, that don't really speak out, but they are there. You know, they're part of the JP Morgan settlement funds, 250 of them. So they're there. And I got power. I got empowered speaking out. And it did something to me. I just felt good about it. Even though I didn't really have the support, I felt good about it.
That's awesome. And then we're gonna get to the best part of if there's a best part, this is it. You become a hero. And I don't say that lightly. And we don't throw, as much as many heroes as we've had on this show over, starting 3 years now, we don't throw that term around a lot because Dan and I both think it means way more than people say sometimes or when they say it. You are, because you took everything that happened to you and you could have just went to LA, did what you did. No one knows, no one nothing, and keep this inside you. And you didn't. You started to speak out, and now you have this unbelievable podcast from now on that you get other people, not necessarily exactly what you went through, but other people that are victims and went through and might have a tough time speaking out, and you give them the opportunity to do that. That's a hero. And I don't say that, hey, we follow each other on those social media, and I look at the comments when you post something, everyone says the same thing about you. So take us through now Lisa's second part of her life with the advocacy and supporting victims.
Well, a lot of people think that I created From Now On because of my experience with Jeffrey Epstein. But just a long story short, when I left the man that wouldn't support me and be there for me, I started speaking out in documentaries. And there was a man from Boston who saw me on a documentary and he reached out to me and he became my friend and confidant. Like I would share things with him and I fell in love with him a little bit. It was over a 4-month period. I didn't really know him that well, but I took a trip out to Boston, during the pandemic to spend some time with him and get to know him. I had known him for 4 months and he had been the guy he was a Christian man who would read me devotionals. And I wasn't a Christian before, but I was always open to Christianity. And I felt like I'm trusting this man. And he found me in a documentary about abuse. So my friends were like, "You sure this guy?" And I was like, "Well, I had a boyfriend at the time, but listened to me, and this man listened to me, and I could talk to him. I finally felt seen and heard, and it's what I was always looking for. I still look for. And so I went to go visit this man, and long story short, you will never believe that this man wanted to abuse me in the same way that I had told him for 4 months how I was abused. Jeffrey abused me in a threesome and with vibrators, right? And and on the night that we were supposed to be intimate together, he literally was starting to choke me. He was spitting on me. He was aggressive. And he literally brought out a vibrator. On the very first time you're with a girl that you're supposedly in love with, and I was falling in love with, like I was like, this is my guy, is my best friend. He wanted to abuse me. He saw me speak out about Jeffrey Epstein, and for 4 months baited me in the same way. And I fell for it because I was so vulnerable. I was so vulnerable and I didn't have any support. And this man was evil. He was a sadist. I found out he was abused when he was younger, and his own sisters helped me to get away from him. But it was a horrible thing. Like he was so latched on. So survivors speaking out, we are strong, we speak out, but you have to understand when we're talking about predators, they know when women have been abused and they like it and they want to further abuse you. And this is the sick world that we live in. And I'm in my 40s. I wasn't 21 years old. So it doesn't matter. You can be tricked and groomed at any age. And that's why I created From Now On. Because I was like, oh, shoot, I can't handle this anymore. I literally had to break away from this man. He was a stalker. He was sadistic. He was narcissistic and sadist. He was trying to like come over to my house when he had COVID and have sex with me. Like it was just a brutal relationship I couldn't get out of. And after that, it was 2 years. 2 years. I worked on myself and I said, no more, man. I cannot. After being in love and then finding a guy who just wanted to abuse me in the same way Jeffrey did. He was obsessed with Jeffrey Epstein. There are many men out there who are obsessed with becoming a Puff Daddy, a Jeffrey Epstein, a Bill Cosby. They want to abuse. So I was like, we need people to understand. Stop blaming victims. Stop blaming us for being stupid, or why did you stay, or why did you fall for him? Like, how am I supposed to know? He was a master manipulator and charmer. Everybody loved him too. So mass destruction these men cause. And it's a small part of the population. All men are not like this. I love men. I'm raising 3 men, little men. And I do love men, and there are great men out there. But there is a small part of the population of men that hate women. They hate them. They want to abuse you. They want to hurt you and want to torture you. And this is the second time it happened to me. One when I was in my early 20s and one when I'm in my early 40s. Just a couple years ago. And so I started From Now On because I went through this transition for 2 years where I was not dating. I didn't want anything to do with men. I had one guy that I hung out with who was a good friend and one girlfriend. And I just wanted to focus on myself. And I was a model scout, at a big agency. And in the business of modeling has gotten so just out of control. It's not about talented people anymore, as anybody can become a model, and it's so superficial, and everything is fake, and everything's tweaked. So that I didn't want to be in the superficial world anymore. I wanted real, raw truth. And I was shopping a podcast about the modeling business, and everyone kept saying, "Aren't you the girl that's speaking out about Jeffrey Epstein?" And I'm like, "Yeah, but I can't talk about that." And they're just like, "Well, someone needs to speak about this." And all the survivors like, "Lisa, you're the one to do this." And I was like, "No, no, no." Like, I can't do that. I don't have family support. I don't have support, and I need that kind of support. And so I was just like, "Lisa, you got to find it in you. You're the one to do this. You've got to do this." And so I did it. And I was just like, I'm going to do this. And I created From Now On. And I want it to be about me telling my story, but not the focus on me. I want to tell my story bit by bit by bit as it relates to another survivor who's telling her story, or his. We'll get to his. But her story, and there's many survivors out there who don't get a voice. They don't get a voice. What we get is sensationalized abusers. We're in love with the abuser. And that's what they portray on film and TV and everywhere. And it's all you read about in the news. But no, I want to make it about the survivors. So that's what I did. I created From Now On, survivor to survivor, stories that can uplift and heal and empower through our resilience and our healing process.
I would urge everyone from now on to make From Now On one of your favorite podcasts. There is a great amount of our society simply doesn't understand the nature of abuse. Tom and I, during our careers, had the chance to deal with it, sadly, way too commonly. It is one of the scourges and one of the shames of our nation, actually, that there's so much domestic abuse in this country. But it's not all physically violent. Much of it is psychological, emotional, financial, you name it. People go through a lot. You've been through a lot. You've been through years of it. You've seen all different manifestations of it. And it all comes down to one thing. It's dehumanizing to you, and it's meant to make you feel as though you're the one responsible for it or that you're bad. And it's done by people who are sociopathic, people who don't care, people who want what they want, and who want to use, or like you said, have an anger or an issue with women. There's a lot of broken people in this world. How do you find one who isn't broken? I don't really know the answer to that. It's hard because people, wolves come in sheep clothing. Or
Yeah, and they're
wolves
good.
come in
And they're
sheep's
good.
clothing. Yeah. And in the case of Jeffrey Epstein and this guy from Boston and many other people, they're very good. Yes, you're right. Um, I just find your story so uplifting. You are truly somebody that we like to have on our show, which is a person who has gone through something and has not just taken it, like Tom said earlier, to the beach with them and said, "Oh, the heck with it, it's over." No, you're taking it and you're making it public so that people can learn, so that somebody else out there will not have to deal with this. Maybe somebody will see a warning sign that you talk about and they'll recognize, "Uh-oh, I should pay attention to this. I heard that podcast and it talked about this, and I don't want to be a victim of that too." I know that's your goal, right?
Yes, that's the goal.
Amazing. There's we say this all the time, and we're so blessed, with this show. When at the end of the show, when either Dan and I are speechless, this was a great show. And it was everything I knew it would be. We talked about, knew this was going to be this type of interview. And you are absolutely one of the strongest women I know, for sure. And it's funny, just so everyone knows, and just how the world and how life works sometimes. Think of social media, okay? The vast craziness of social media. One day I'm flipping through something on my phone and happened to flip once, saw you talking, and a little caption underneath that said, I got away from Jeffrey Epstein or whatever. So I went, whoa, hold on. Who's that? And that was it. And here we are. And that's how crazy life is. And you are doing something important that is resonating, that we are certainly going to prop up and talk about even more than we are right now. Lisa, close it out. What do you got to say for everyone? A message, all that.
Well, I just want to say thank you to you. You know, a lot of people don't know this, but Tom, you made me feel super comfortable to be able to speak out. It's not easy to share my story, and you've kept in touch with me, you've called me, you've supported me on social media, and that has meant it's meant the world to me. And it made me feel like I can share and really tell my story because I'm just still the type of person that shares bits and pieces here and there, and to walk through my whole story is it's I feel super, I feel good here on your podcast, and I feel really good, and that you guys are listening and that you're supportive of me, and that just means the world to me. And I love what you're doing. You need to do this for survivors. You need to have our voices on more often. So thank you for that.
Well, Lisa, you're an exceptional, exceptional human being. And as Tom just said, I'm proud to now call you a friend. And I know that great things lie ahead for you. You're going to continue to do great things. God has a plan for you, and it certainly didn't end in Epstein Island. It certainly just began there in many ways. You have 3 boys who are very lucky to have a mom who is as strong, as smart, as determined, as fair and decent and kind as you are. And all of that comes through in you. You're a very special human being. Thank you for our audience. I know is going to love this program. They're going to love listening to, and they're going to want to go listen to from now on. I know I will.
Don't go anywhere. We got some more to talk about. But everyone out there, thank you for joining us on our premiere of season 3 of Gold Shields. Can't do it without you. This isn't a show without the people who have been supporting us and following us and subscribing and all that. This isn't a show, like Dan said, I think we're up to 72 countries and 3,500 cities or whatever it might be. We don't have that without you. So continue to support us on our website, thegoldshieldshow.com, youtube.com/@goldshields, and every audio channel you can think of. This is a special time in our show that we pray for our law enforcement officers, we pray for our military, and we pray for our victims out there. Keep them all in your prayers. They need our support. They need our thoughts. They need our prayers because life is hard, not even just in the military, but in law enforcement, first responders, and of course, victims going forward with their lives after events like this that you just heard. So keep them all in your prayers as well. For our amazing, incredible, unforgettable guest, Lisa Phillips, my partner, Dan Murphy, this is Tom Smith. Everyone, thanks again. We'll see everybody soon, and stay safe.